Oh, this part. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. My voice hurts after that.
As a result, Watchmen.
Hello everybody. It's your boy Proftrof. We're back again with a new camera and another critical drinker video. This is a one I've wanted to see for a while, but Goldfish Brain was like, nah, you forget about this every day. So this is Watchmen 2009. Was it really that bad? I love this movie. So I hope he doesn't shit talk because I'll probably be triggered. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite superhero movies, if not my favorite superhero movie. So
Well, since you're here, allow me to regale you with another story from the annals of cinema history.
No.
When it comes to controversial movie directors that are still working today, it's tough to think of one more divisive and contentious than Zack Snyder. Depending on who you talk to, the man's either a visual genius who helped to usher in a unique new cinematic style for comic book adaptations, or a talentless, overrated hack whose movies look like they were shot in the middle of a power cut. Whereas the iconic shots of 300 really put him on the map, the grim, somber and depressing tone of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman practically knocked him off it. But there's another Zack Snyder movie that's a bit more difficult to categorise. A movie that dared to tackle source material so challenging that it frustrated some of the best writers and producers in Hollywood for decades. A movie named Watchmen. Based off the labyrinthine and extremely mature comic book series, Watchmen tells the story of a group of former crime fighters living in an alternate 1980s America, poised on the brink of nuclear war. With a cast of flawed, morally questionable characters doing distinctly unheroic things to reach their goal, it dared to ask the question, if superheroes could exist, would you really want them to? Watchmen copped a lot of shit when it came out back in 2009. Fans of the original...
It did? Wow, what?
Comic series were somehow surprised that a 2.5-hour movie wasn't able to incorporate every single element from the 450-page graphic novel.
Surprise.
Oh, shit.
General audiences, on the other hand, went into theaters expecting a fun, action-packed superhero flick about a bunch of good guys out to save the world.
Yeah.
And well, that's not exactly what they got.
Oh, this part. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. My voice hurts after that.
As a result, Watchmen failed to generate enough momentum to break through at the box office. Combined with lukewarm reviews from journalists, remember when people still cared what they thought? It gained a reputation as a bit of a critical and commercial failure. But was it really? Well, it's not like I can go back and fudge the box office numbers. What do you think I am, Disney? But I can take a closer look at Watchmen as a creative endeavour and try to answer the age-old question, was it really that bad? Now, the theatrical cut is over 2.5 hours long, so needless to say, the story is a bit of a fucking monster, and if I tried to break down every single plot point, then this review would probably end up longer than Mahler's TFA series.
Wow, bro, that's longer than the movie. My best to give you before we continue, question for all y'all watching. Did you like Watchmen? Everyone I talked to, all my friends, they liked it. I loved it. So it's kind of weird for me to hear that it didn't do well or people did not like it. I mean, I kind of understand it considering what it portrays.
A decent overview of the story. So let's begin, shall we? Watchmen takes place in an alternate 1985 America, where masked crime fighters have been around since the 1940s. At least they were, until they got outlawed a few years earlier after a wave of public backlash. Now the few that remain have either retired to live out their lives as normal people, become government agents, or ignored the ban and continued to operate outside the law. Meanwhile, the accidental creation of a godlike being known as Dr. Manhattan has allowed Richard Nixon to win the Vietnam War and a third term in office, not to mention shifting the balance of the Cold War in favour of America. Backed into a corner, the Soviets are becoming increasingly desperate and unpredictable, pushing the world to the brink of Armageddon. The main storyline kicks off with the murder of an elderly crime fighter known as the Comedian, which attracts the attention of his former comrade Rorschach, named because of the ink blot mask that he wears to hide his identity. Believing that former members of the Watchmen crime fighting group are being targeted for assassination, Rorschach tries to contact the others and warn them. This is where we get to meet the other main characters of the story. There's Night Owl, who used to be a Batman type character with a badass suit and a hover jet, but now he's fat and retired and kind of a pussy. Ozymandias
fat. He is a pussy though.
On the other hand, has used his scientific genius to become a billionaire tech giant, hoping to use science to avert a nuclear war. Then there's Dr. Manhattan himself, who now works as an agent of the US government along with his girlfriend Silk Spectre. Manhattan's abilities allow him to experience the universe outside of linear time, meaning that his mind basically exists in the past, present and future all at once. As you can probably imagine, this makes it pretty hard for him to focus on little things like the outcome of the Cold War, and there's a growing rumour that he may actually be a threat to humanity. This all comes to a head during a disastrous TV interview where he tries to reassure the public, only to be confronted by a former lover that claims he gave her a terminal illness. Overwhelmed by all the attention...
Listen, woman, are you surprised you took the atomic cock? Of course you're gonna get some weird shit. No one's surprised, okay?
He teleports himself to the surface of Mars for some downtime. But with America's ultimate weapon missing in action, the Soviets used the opportunity to invade Afghanistan, bringing the world even closer to World War III. Meanwhile, just as Rorschach's getting closer to the truth of the comedian's death, he's framed for the murder of a former supervillain and sent to prison for it. Knowing he'll be dead within hours if they don't do something, Night Owl and Silk Spectre are forced to come out of retirement to rescue him. That's the three basic strands to Watchmen's story. The first follows the growing...
I'm cooking some stuff, so I'll be... Okay.
Relationship between Night Owl and Silk Spectre as they dust off their capes and costumes for the first time in years. The second follows Rorschach's search for the truth and his growing suspicion that there's a much bigger conspiracy at work. Rorschach. And the third centers on Dr. Manhattan, trying to decide whether humanity even deserves to be saved. In between all this, we get flashbacks to the defining events of each character's life over the previous decades, most of which centre around the comedian and his gradual transformation from honourable crime fighter to bloodthirsty warrior to cynical and embittered old man. He's like the bridge that spans the different generations of superheroes, from the innocent optimism of the 1940s to the turbulence and disillusionment of the 70s, and finally to the grim foreboding of the 80s, where there are no heroes anymore, and the world stands on the brink of annihilation, with nobody left to pull it back. He also gets one of the best lines in the entire movie.
What happened to the American dream? What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it.
As the main characters eventually join forces to uncover the truth, they learn that the comedian's death was part of something much bigger and more sinister than a simple assassination, and that one of their own may in fact be working against them. And with the doomsday clock ticking down to midnight, they discover that the price of saving the world could be higher than any of them ever imagined. Now, when I think about Watchmen's relative failure at the box office, I can't shake the feeling that it was, at heart, a badly marketed film. Anyone who went into this movie expecting a traditional, upbeat comic book flick where the hero defeats the bad guy and saves the world is going to come away from Watchmen feeling pretty disappointed. It's simply not that kind of movie because it was never meant to be. Look beneath the flashy visuals, and Watchmen is a complex film that explores interesting aspects of the superhero genre. I'm kind of hesitant to use the word deconstruction because these days it conjures up images of angry, purple-haired land whales that think their gender studies degree is a magical key to unlock the mysteries of complex storytelling. But in this case, it really is the best way to describe what Watchmen does. It's a movie that's not afraid to challenge our conventions and assumptions about superheroes. It tells a complex, multi-layered story spanning decades, with characters that represent vastly differing ideas and worldviews. And it does this in a patient, detailed and methodical way, laying the groundwork for the big emotional payoffs that come later. It takes the time to build up the history of its world and the characters that live in it, giving us big, elaborate flashbacks to previous groups and events, whose connection to the main story only becomes clear much later. Like seeing a young version of the comedian trying to rape the first Silk Spectre back in the 1940s. A scene like this might seem like a pointless detour into self-indulgent territory until you realise that not only does it establish the darker side of the comedian's personality, but it also gets put into an entirely different context later when you find out that Silk Spectre actually fell in love with him despite his flaws, even having a child with him. A child whose unlikely conception ultimately helps Dr. Manhattan to rediscover his humanity. Just like a watch mechanism, even the smallest piece has a role to play. Every scene and flashback sheds a bit more light on the events that brought us here, providing insight into the film's cast of flawed, morally ambiguous characters. And this is
Shut up, Rorschach is perfect!
another aspect of Watchmen that I really have to give the movie credit for. Most of Watchmen's characters are neither good nor bad. They all act according to their own worldview, and whether or not you consider them heroes or villains depends very much on your own perspective. Rorschach, for example, is a violent vigilante operating outside the law, ruthlessly pursuing his investigation with no regard for anyone caught in his path. He's extremely conservative in his view of the world, openly despising liberals, homosexuals, prostitutes, drug users, or anyone who strays off a righteous path. He's a man of deep principle and conviction, moulded by a harsh and unforgiving life, and he sees the world purely in terms of right and wrong, black and white, if you will. Compared to the others, he's not particularly big or physically strong. He's not super smart, and he doesn't have any powers or gadgets. He's just a tough, tenacious little bastard, ready and willing to...
Well, all of them are not normal, okay? All of them are stronger, faster, you know, all that good shit. But I guess compared to the other of the team, maybe, I mean, we've never really got Rorschach versus, like, the Batman dude. So we don't really know how strong he is.
Without any fear or hesitation,
compared to the normal people,
ready to fight dirty and use any advantage he can find. Like when this guy tries to confront him in prison. Doesn't end too well for him though. Rorschach is a man who lives by a strict moral code and won't break it for any reason, even at the cost of personal friendships or his own life.
Oh, that was so good.
Unbending willpower, and his philosophy is perfectly summed up in this line.
Never compromise. Not even in the face of Armageddon.
At the other end of the spectrum, you've got the comedian, who has no real morals or principles to live by. He treats everyone around him like shit, openly abuses his powers, and seems resigned to the looming threat of nuclear war. But at one point, confronted by the truth of what's about to happen, he breaks down and acknowledges his own failings and mistakes. He's an old man now, brooding over a wasted life. Dr. Manhattan, on the other hand, is so disconnected from the world that he sees the survival of humanity as a simple intellectual problem, rather than something he actually cares about on a deeper level. Like in this flashback, when the comedian guns down a pregnant woman who attacks him, only to point out that Dr. Manhattan could have prevented the whole thing if he wanted. Instead, he chose to do nothing. That says a lot about where his head's at. Ultimately, the character is there to pose an interesting question. If you give a man the powers of a god, what will that actually do to his humanity? Night Owl and Silk Spectre round out the main cast, and for what it's worth, they're probably the most well-adjusted of the bunch. Both are retired at the start of the movie. One's living a life of luxury and privilege as the girlfriend of Dr. Manhattan. The other is a timid, overweight bookworm who spends his days reminiscing with the first owner of the Night Owl name. But both of them are frustrated and unfulfilled because their lives lack purpose and meaning now. A dinner date quickly turns somber as they realise there really isn't much to look forward to anymore. It's only when they're forced to suit up again that they start to come alive, and the adrenaline rush of beating the shit out of some criminals reignites their physical relationship. And you're left to wonder, are they really doing this for the right reasons? Or are they just two fighters trying to recapture their glory days? On that subject, one of the threads running through this movie is the idea of youthful idealism gradually giving way to cynicism and disenchantment as characters are forced to make way for the next generation. Like the first Silk Spectre, who becomes an embittered drunk, yearning for her younger days. Or Dr. Manhattan's former girlfriend, who he literally traded in for a younger model. Or even the first Night Owl, who wrote a scathing autobiography exposing the darker side of masked crime fighters. Watchmen doesn't just ask questions about what happens when flawed and unworthy people are given the mantle of hero, it also explores what becomes of those people when they have to hang up their capes for the last time, facing up to their autumn years in the knowledge that their best days are long behind them. But the biggest and most interesting revelations are saved for the finale, when our heroes converge on the enemy stronghold to confront the movie's villain at the 11th hour and foil his plans for world domination. Except, this particular villain isn't out to dominate the world, he's out to save it. And there's no chance of foiling his plans here. There's no last second reprieve like we've seen a million times before. By the time they track him down, he's already put his plan into action. And even Dr. Manhattan's intervention isn't enough to stop him. It's a scene that's both surprising and refreshing.
Technically, considering Dr. Manhattan's power, maybe he should have been able to stop everything. I mean, like, his powers are very vague. Technically, he can do everything. Technically. So, I don't know.
And you're left to wonder what the hell happens next. Just like Thanos a decade later, Ozymandias can be seen as the tragic anti-hero of Watchmen's story. A smart, logical, pragmatic man forced to do the unthinkable to save the world from total destruction, sacrificing millions of innocent lives in order to save billions more, and uniting the entire world against a common enemy by framing Dr. Manhattan for the whole thing. Peace founded on a dark lie, but peace all the same. The question is it enough? As much as they hate to admit it, even the heroes come to recognize the wisdom of his plan.
You understand, don't you? Without condoning or condemning.
Man, it's nice to see Ozymandias being treated with respect and reverence here, instead of turned into the butt of a fucking unfunny joke.
Watchmen TV show.
Fuck off, Damon Lindelof, you useless hack. It's a brilliant resolution to the overarching threat of annihilation that perfectly encapsulates everything this movie's been trying to say. That in the real world, there are no easy, comfortable answers. There are no clear heroes and villains. No simple choice between right and wrong. There are just people, flawed and weak and human, trying to make the best choices they can. And this for me is what makes Watchmen such a clever, complex, satisfying movie. It doesn't provide easy answers or neat resolutions, but instead it asks difficult questions that lesser movies would have shied away from. What does a man lose if he gains the power of a god? How do people control their darker impulses when they've been freed from responsibility?
Well, I mean, if you're him, you don't.
Are humans only capable of working together when they have a common enemy to strive against? These are interesting questions, and I'm glad the movie had the balls to ask them. It's not all perfect, of course. While the grim, dark, foreboding atmosphere of the comic is perfectly conveyed here, and it's clear that some shots were literally taken right off the page, the endless rain and gloom can be kinda monotonous at times, and some of the nuclear war references are a bit on the nose. Like, do we really need to hear 99 Red Balloons playing twice? Does everything need to reference the blood-covered smiley face pointing at 5 to midnight on the doomsday clock? The movie also omits a lot of details and subplots from the graphic novel, for obvious reasons. If you're trying to condense a 450-page story into about 150 pages of actual script, then clearly some stuff needs to go. The Ultimate Edition actually fixes many of these issues, and it even adds in the Tales of the Black Freighter content, but the result is a movie that's well over 3 hours long. It's up to you if you consider that a
I don't know if I've seen that one. Maybe I need to.
Worthy trade-off. Long, grim and dark it might be, but I think Watchmen does a pretty decent job of capturing the essence of the comic, getting across the same ideas, even if it does it in a more streamlined way. And I'm just gonna say it, this is the kind of movie that Zack Snyder was born to direct. Why they thought he was the right guy to do a Superman flick is beyond me, but Watchmen is well within his directorial comfort zone, and it shows. Overall then, while it may not be to everyone's taste, I genuinely think Watchmen is a decent stab at bringing some pretty challenging source material to the big screen. It's a movie that's not afraid to give us a complex, morally grey, thought-provoking story with equally complex characters, delivering on both style and substance. And for that reason, it gets a solid recommendation from the drinker. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
I'm happy with that finale. I am happy. I thought I was gonna show on it when I saw that. I was like, what the hell? I didn't know people didn't like this movie. I love this movie. And I really look at, you know, grades and shit they gave it, like marks, like damn stuff. I'm really curious to read what y'all thought about this movie when you watched it. I'm really curious to see if people actually hated it and for what reason. Now that I've said that, if you want to see more reactions to the Critical Drinker from your boy, playlist up here. Quick thank you to the YouTube members and patrons. Thank you all for the support. Much love. I appreciate you all. I'll catch you all next time. Bye bye, everybody.